Jeffrey Epstein, an ordinary man who became so powerful, he had people like Donald Trump, Bill Gates, Vladimir Putin in the palm of his hands. He was not a president, nor a billionaire visionary, but just a man who seemed to appear wherever power gathered. And that alone raises a question. How does someone like that exist? This is beyond the forgotten, and today we dive deep into the most dark crimes and conspiracies of Jeffrey Epstein. Jeffrey Epstein did not come from a rich family. He wasn't born into old money. He didn't inherit an empire. There was no dynasty behind his name. He grew up in Brooklyn middle class, quiet, unremarkable. He was good with numbers, smart but not exceptional on paper. And yet, somehow, doors opened. He taught at an elite private school despite lacking formal credentials. He moved in circles where wealth whispered instead of spoke. And slowly, he learned something important. Power doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes, it listens. Epstein listened well. He remembered details. He mirrored people's beliefs. He made the powerful feel understood, and in return, they trusted him. Not with secrets, not with confessions, but with access. That was his real currency. By the 1990s, Epstein's name began appearing in places that didn't make sense. Private jets, private islands, private gatherings. He was photographed near presidents, royalty, scientists, financiers. Not because he led them, but because he moved among them. And that distinction matters. Being near power does not mean controlling it, but proximity has weight. It changes perception. It raises questions. Why was he there? What was his role? What did he offer? Some people said he was a financier, others said a connector. Some said he was simply useful. What's known is this: Epstein built a world where powerful people crossed paths quietly. And once a world like that exists, it protects itself. Then came the accusations. Young women and girls, some as young as 14 or 15. Similar stories of being recruited for massages at his Palm Beach mansion that turned into sexual assault. Patterns of grooming, manipulation, and a pipeline of victims to his New York home and private Caribbean island that were hard to ignore. In 2005, Palm Beach police began investigating, uncovering a sex trafficking operation, and what followed would become one of the most controversial legal outcomes in modern history, a deal secretly negotiated by his high-powered lawyers, including Alan Dershowitz, and overseen by then U.S. Attorney Alexander Acosta, that dropped a federal sex trafficking indictment, immunized his co-conspirators, and was hidden from victims. A deal that stunned the FBI prosecutors who had built a life sentence case. A deal that outraged victims because it reduced his crimes to simple prostitution charges. A deal that allowed Epstein to plead guilty in 2008 to only 2 state prostitution charges and walk free after just 13 months in a private jail wing with daily work release. The question wasn't just why he avoided harsher punishment. It was how. Who intervened? His social circle of billionaires, politicians, and intellectuals who stayed silent. Those in his orbit who may have seen or heard something but said nothing for years. And who benefited from that silence? There are no confirmed answers about the full extent of the complicity. Only documents. Flight logs showing visits by figures like Bill Clinton and Donald Trump. Timelines of parties, private island trips, and the decade of impunity the deal provided. And a growing sense that something had gone terribly wrong in the very system meant to protect the vulnerable from the powerful. On July 6, 2019, Teterboro Airport, New Jersey, Jeffrey Epstein stepped off his private Boeing 727, the so-called Lolita Express. He had just returned from Paris. This time, there was no negotiation, only federal agents and handcuffs. The indictment was for sex trafficking conspiracy, alleging a years-long operation. This time, the system seemed poised to hold him. The world watched as he was denied bail and locked in the Metropolitan Correctional Center in Manhattan, a concrete box for a man who had once curated a world of private planes and tropical islands. A man who controlled everything now controlled nothing. Then, on the morning of August 10th, he was found dead in his cell. The ruling was suicide, but the scene refused to align with a simple conclusion. The camera outside his cell had malfunctioned. The guards had failed to make their rounds. He had been removed from suicide watch days earlier. It was a cascade of failures too convenient, too perfect, for a prisoner who knew too much. In the absence of credible answers, conspiracies exploded. The reason? Well, it wasn't because the public wanted drama, but because the official story offered no clarity. It offered only broken cameras and missed checks. The man who had evaded justice for so long had now escaped final accountability entirely, not with a verdict, but with a mystery. Was he silenced for knowing too much, or perhaps did he fake his own death? Think about it. A man of infinite resources and connections doesn't just sit in a cell and wait. He arranges his final escape. And about the body in the cell? A look-alike, a paid stand-in. The botched procedures? Not incompetence, but careful, paid-for chaos. Staged scene. Think about it. He had the money to buy an island. Could he buy a death certificate? He had a network of private pilots and offshore hideaways. Was he taken to a tomb and buried, or maybe put on a plane? Strange things added to the conspiracy. The supposed autopsy photos that most people said showed another body. The closed casket viewing for his brother. And the unusual delay in the official announcement lead to the people doubting the official story. But to turn doubt into a theory, you need a blueprint. You need a who and a how. The blueprint always pointed to the company he kept, to the men who weren't just friends but architects. On top of the list was Ehud Barak, the former prime minister and military intelligence chief of Israel, who wasn't just a dinner guest, but Epstein's most frequent, highest-ranking visitor in the years after Epstein was a registered sex offender. Security logs and photographs documented his visits to the Manhattan townhouse, often using the back entrance. A move that spoke of discretion, not social calls. Barak admitted the convicted felon advised him on investments. For a man whose career was built on Mossad operations and strategic deception, this relationship was a lock with no clear key. Now this is where the facts fade, and the darkest conspiracy begins, what some call the Mossad angle. The theory says that Epstein was never just a financier or a predator. He was an asset, a non-official cover, luring global elites with bizarre fetishes to his island and homes, creating a web of blackmail material through hidden cameras and compromised situations, was a perfect, deniable intelligence scheme. The target wasn't cash, it was compliance, leverage over US politicians, European royalty, and billionaires to sway policy, investment, and influence in directions favorable to a specific geopolitical agenda. Now, where some people believe that he faked his own death, there are various counter-theories that he was killed by the very people he was launched by. If the first story framed him as a protected asset, this one frames him as a liquidated liability. Think about it. His operation worked only in the shadows. The 2019 arrest dragged it into the blinding light of a federal courtroom. He was no longer an intelligence gatherer. He was a walking, talking database of catastrophic exposure. A man who could, under oath, name names, detail methods, and burn an entire network to the ground. So the calculus changed. The same people who launched him had to disappear him permanently. The broken cameras and the sleeping guards weren't for an escape plan. They were for a clean, quiet termination, a final piece of tradecraft to silence a rogue asset. This is where the speculation takes its most inflammatory turn, that Epstein was, in the end, a sacrifice. That his death was a piece of brutal, geopolitical hygiene, cutting out an infected piece to save the body. That he was offered up to protect interests far bigger than himself. It means the mysterious wealth, the intelligence ties, the whole blackmail scheme. It was never his, it was leased. And when the lease was up, the asset was repossessed permanently. So, in the end, we're left with two stories from the same set of facts, and both are terrifying. One says he was saved by his handlers because his value outweighed his risk. The other says he was killed by his handlers because his risk had come to outweigh his value. Both agree on one thing: Jeffrey Epstein's fate was not his own. His end, whether a ghost or a corpse, was authored by the same hidden hand that built him. This is Beyond the Forgotten. Subscribe and step deeper into the conspiracies they don't want you to see.